Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Empowered Hormones podcast. Today, I have the privilege of speaking to Amy. So, Amy Armstrong is a mineral obsessed mum of three, a root cause protocol consultant, a certified HTMA practitioner, which we will get into for those who don't know what a hair trace mineral analysis is, and also a holistic health coach. So Amy found herself drawn into the natural healing world on a quest to help her chronically ill child become well and also improve her own rapidly failing health. So after spending many years trying different therapies and treatments, Amy found the work of Morley Robbins, hallelujah, and began the root cause protocol, through which both her daughter and herself experienced profound healing. So thank you so much for being here today, Amy. It sounds like you've got quite a story for us.
Yeah, Sheridan, thank you so much. I'm honoured to be joining you on your podcast. Yeah, there's a bit of a backstory there. Basically our journey that really changed the state of our family's health started way back in 2014 when my 5-year-old daughter at the time had some really significant health issues stemming from an overactive immune system and a very inflamed brain. So she's a thriving, healthy 13-year-old now and really doesn't like me to talk about it too much, but I do mention it because it's so relevant to my own health journey. So I guess to give you a brief history on me, I was a kind of a standard Aussie kid on a standard Aussie diet, and I guess I had the standard Aussie kind of kid health issues as well. So I had quite severe asthma, bad allergies, deathly allergic to cats I was, as well as, pollen and everything else that was going around, digestive issues, and it all sort of seemed to pick up steam through my teens and 20s. And by my 30s, I was suffering from a pretty long laundry list of health complaints, including, digestive issues, gallbladder issues, thyroid issues, insomnia, acne. There's a whole list there. I could go on, but it probably wasn't until my daughter became really ill that the stress of kind of that situation, and also having a toddler and a baby at the time, that my health really did start to decline more rapidly into conditions like endometriosis. I had breast and ovarian cysts. I had bouts of very bad depression, anxiety, daily panic attacks, just basically total nervous system dysregulation and chronic fatigue, which kept me, in bed a lot. And of course, along with that chronic fatigue came a diagnosis of iron deficiency anemia, which is really, I guess, what I'm here to talk about today is about that iron. One day, after spending many thousands, seeing so many practitioners, having so much testing for the both of us at that point, I really just made a decision that I thought I needed to be in the driver's seat and make some choices to heal all of us, because my other 2 children were suffering some chronic conditions as well. So the research began. I had a little bit of a science background, and I dug into the weeds of minerals, and that was really the catalyst for healing, and ultimately a career change for me when I realised, I thought, so many other women and families could probably benefit from knowing and me sharing what I had learnt and what had helped us. So. And at that time, it was the mineral balancing protocol, the root cause protocol, and a lot of dietary and lifestyle changes along with that. And today, I guess, we're going to talk more specifically about the mineral balancing in terms of the iron regulation and the iron deficiency in the blood. And I'm really specific when I say in the blood, because iron deficiency in the blood does not necessarily mean iron deficiency in the body, and that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, I think it's a really confusing topic, and there's so many different schools of thoughts around it. And we see a lot of stuff on Instagram about the iron deficiency and the whole iron conundrum in a sense. And also, our basis, our really basic information is I'm tired. GP says test your iron, you go get your iron tested, oh, your iron's low, go on an iron supplement. Like, that's kind of as far as we tend to go. But when we start digging deeper, and like, I'm nowhere near as far as you are into it, but when I came across Morley Robbins stuff, and when I came across the root cause protocol things, and went, there's so much more into this than just taking iron supplement. And for myself, who've been on a real health journey, to come across that and go, wow, like, this is actually not helping us, and this is actually not helping a lot of people by taking an iron supplement or getting an iron infusion or something, but then finding qualified information around it, and then also knowing what to do about it. Because then a lot of people go, oh, well, then I don't take an iron supplement. Well, now what? I'm still flipping tired. Yeah. So it's quite a big topic to unpack, and it must be something that you deal with on a day-to-day basis with your clients then, who are struggling with some of these same sort of concerns, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's not as simplistic. It is simple in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of kind of, I guess, science in the cellular biology behind it. But the message is that I want to get out is that we need to dig a little bit deeper than just making this assumption based on a few markers in our blood that we're low in iron and that we need supplementation, or we need to actually to be taking more iron to improve that situation. So I guess, when it comes to minerals, most of us know what minerals are. They're part of the earth, they're part of the soil, or they should be part of the soil, not so much as they are at the moment.
Yeah.
They're part of the air, they're part of the ocean, they're part of us. And, Mother Nature has filled us with, all of her elements in different and varying amounts. And, we need to understand how to keep these elements, these minerals, in balance to stay in health. And iron is just one part of that picture. So it's really vitality and resilience in the body. That they're the principal aims of what we're trying to achieve when we balance our minerals. And the way to a resilient body with lots of vitality, so a lot of energy, is to ensure we've got good cellular energy production. And, good cellular energy production is kind of foundational for all of our health. And making good energy in the mitochondria requires that a balance of minerals. So I guess when it comes to energy, if you ask most people about their energy, they'll soon be able to tell you whether they're experiencing enough in terms of their mental and physical health, but they probably couldn't tell you where and how in their body that energy is actually made. And for those of us who focus on, this rebalancing the minerals as a way of healing, we're really looking at those cellular energetics. So, how are our cells making energy? Are they making enough energy in face of all the stress that we're under? Stress from our environment, stress from our food system, stress from our relationships, our work, all the stress. And then the other question is, how cleanly is that energy being made? And are our bodies able to deal with the exhaust from making that energy? So when you start to think about that energy making process, you start to think about, well, what minerals are needed to make that energy in our cells as cleanly and efficiently as possible, I guess. So it's really simple at the end of the day in some ways. A body that is making energy cleanly and efficiently because it has the mineral capacity to do so, that's a body that has a much higher likeliness of functioning well. We're talking about a digestive system that's functioning, a liver that's functioning, a nervous system that's functioning, hormones that are balanced. We're talking about a body that's kind of able to put up defenses when needed and regulate its own pathogenic load, and a body that's able to detox effectively. And, a body that can basically be resilient and metabolize all the stress of living in our environment.
Yeah, because so often we're saying we're tired, isn't it? You know, when we're saying I'm tired, I'm fatigued, but we're not thinking deeper, going, well, on a cellular level, am I actually creating energy? We're just going, I'm tired, something's not right. Either I'm overdoing it or I'm not eating well or something's going on with my hormones, and that's about as far as it gets. And then usually there's caffeine or stimulants or things that we then take to, you know, give us that upper, even though we're not actually dealing with, like you'd say, the root of it, going, well, why are we not creating enough energy and what's going on there? And then, you know, as you sort of said, well, there's a huge role of minerals in this whole aspect, which I don't think a lot of us are considering straight off the bat. And like you said, maybe because we're not getting as many from our diet anymore, there's that interplay as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, I like to think about it like this, you know, it's minerals are so foundational to our health in the fact that, you know, every enzyme requires a mineral as a key to run. And enzymes are what make all these reactions happen within our bodies. So I think we really sell ourselves short when we just start to think at a hormone level or at just a digestive system, or we can start to compartmentalize the body, because underpinning all of that is, you know, the very first question we should be asking, in my opinion, is, you know, do we have the mineral capacity to even have a body that's functioning properly? And then, of course, we can build layers on top of that and ask more questions, but it seems like the foundation from which we should really be starting at.
So if someone is presenting as tired and fatigued, is it not inappropriate, it's not the word, but is it inappropriate for the GP to be doing blood testing and saying the iron is low? Like, if you're tired, should you be looking at iron? And then that leads into the next question of, well, how much iron do we actually need? But should, you know, is there actually a link with iron and energy, or is it more the overall mineral stress, digestive load?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, there absolutely is a link with iron, just not in the way that we think about it now. So I guess, you know, there are minerals that are really energetic to our bodies, like copper, magnesium, sodium, potassium. You know, think about the electrical currents running through our cells that give the cells that ability to vibrate at a certain frequency and to have a certain pH and to communicate with each other. And, you know, this relies on minerals being in the right balance. So on the other side of the coin, we've got minerals, really structural minerals like iron. And I'm pretty sure now, you know, most of us would know to some extent what iron does in our bodies. You know, we associate it with energy, because it's responsible for carrying, a bit like a waiter, it's responsible for carrying that oxygen around that does eventually get made into energy. So naturally we think if we don't have enough energy, we mustn't have enough iron. But really what most of us wouldn't know is, although iron carries the oxygen, it's copper that activates that oxygen to become energy. And if that oxygen can't be activated, because we don't have the copper capacity, then it becomes like an accident with oxygen, which we know as oxidative stress. So copper is vital in that picture, even though it's iron delivering that oxygen. So yes, iron is absolutely a necessary part of that process, and it's essential for life. You know, we're not arguing that. But without copper, that oxygen can't be used right. And of course, in that energy making process, that can't happen without magnesium either. So that, you know, magnesium's an integral part of ATP. It's actually magnesium ATP, ATP being that energy molecule. So
is that then saying that iron is low if you're low in energy, or?
Yep. So it can be showing up as low in our blood, which doesn't necessarily mean we don't have it in our bodies. And I guess the question is, you know, it comes down to what minerals do we perhaps need more of, and what minerals do we need to keep in checks and balances in the body. And, you know, counter to that popular belief we might not need more iron in the body, which is what you're asking if it's measuring low. We may just need our iron to be more functional in our bodies.
Yeah.
And the way to make it functional is in the presence of copper and magnesium, and one really important vitamin called retinol, which is preformed or animal-based vitamin A. And if we can get the balance right, that's what can really allow us to be producing energy effectively and being able to clear the exhaust and to have our cells functioning properly. So we've got that energy and vitality and resilience to disease. So I guess, what you're asking is how much iron do we actually need? So maybe I'll talk about that, and then I can talk about the different blood markers that show it, if that,
Yeah, awesome. Yeah.
So when we're talking about how much iron we actually need, it's really important to know a couple of things. And the first one is that we don't have a good excretory pathway for iron to exit our bodies apart from blood loss. So unless you're actively bleeding, so giving blood is a good way, and of course menstruation for women as well. Apart from that, once it's in your body, it's not going anywhere. So yes, there is some sloughing off from the gut and things like that, but regardless of how much iron you put in your body, that can only happen at a certain rate anyway. So we are accumulating iron for every year we're on this earth. We are accumulating it, and our iron levels are going up. Maybe not necessarily in our blood, but I'll get to that, but in our tissue. And so someone like Morley, Robbins would say that iron is what ages us, because for every year we're here, we're accumulating it in our bodies, and it's essentially rusting us from the inside out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So then we have to think about how much we're getting by way of enriched foods. If you're eating a diet high in refined grains, there's a really good chance that they're enriched with iron. And many of these forms, this is probably a whole nother topic, but so many forms are essentially iron filings. I think there's 9 or 11 forms of iron that they actually use in food, and many of them are considered carcinogenic. So that should be making the hair on your arm stand up just a little bit, just even thinking about that. And then you've got to add to that iron supplementation. So many menstruating women are put on iron supplements because there's this assumption that if you're having heavy bleeding, then and you're fatigued and you're tired, then you're iron deficient or even anemic. So what we really need is about 25 milligrams of iron a day. And the really important thing to know there is that 24 milligrams of that, so like 95% of that iron, comes from our own recycling system. Who knows this?
Yeah.
So that leaves 1 milligram that we need from food. And yes, when you take into consideration that we only absorb a small amount of that iron, and it does depend whether it's from an animal product or a plant product, it's still going to be a sight less than most of us are consuming on a daily basis. And things like, breakfast cereal is the prime example. Breakfast cereals, I have read, can contain up to 48 milligrams of iron in a realistic. I'm not talking about the serve on the back of the packet or on the back of the box. I'm talking about the serve that we are really more likely to be eating. And add to this iron supplements, iron fortified foods, and you get the picture, like too much iron. And then if you add to that picture then the ever lessening amount of copper that we're getting in our diets for various reasons, there's less copper in our soil. We know that. Glyphosate, fertilizer, it actually chelates copper, so it's not usable. And then you add to that like our low-fat diet that we've been told to, that promotes health. So that means a low retinol diet. And of course, retinol is really important to making copper usable, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And you've got this perfect storm for iron accumulation in your body. So I guess your listeners might probably be wondering then at this point, well, okay, well, why is my iron coming back low? So maybe I'm that person who doesn't have enough iron. So that's probably a good time to talk about the iron, the markers that are commonly used. And most people have heard of ferritin, because that's predominantly how we get our iron measured in our blood to determine our iron status. So there's some really interesting research. Sir Douglas Kell is an iron biologist, a scientist that I like to follow. And even people like Morley, Robbins, who, have collated so much of this research going back the last 50 years or more. And what they're saying is that ferritin is not an indicator of your iron status, or homeostasis is probably a better word. So ferritin is actually this intracellular protein that stores iron. And when we take a ferritin blood test, we're actually measuring a protein that should be inside your cell. We're measuring that in your blood, so outside of the cell. Yeah. So research by Douglas Kell, he states that ferritin shouldn't even be found in your serum, which is pretty mind-blowing, because when the ferritin when it's in your serum, ferritin has mostly dumped its load of iron in the cell, and it's been secreted into your blood, which is a sign of organ pathophysiology. Like, it's not a good thing. It's not a sign of iron vitality. So, and the other thing is there's two states to iron. There's a heavy chain and a light chain. So do we even know what we're measuring in a blood test? That's important to know. And I know that's sort of getting into the nitty-gritty, but it's just really important to realise that it's not as simplistic as measuring our ferritin and this being reflective of our iron stores, because it's just not.
So for those listening who, because obviously a lot of this will be starting to go over their heads and they're like, flip, like, I've got low iron, but maybe I don't actually have low iron. So when they're getting iron tested, what's an accurate way of testing it then, so that they actually know what my iron status is?
Great question. And so we're looking at a number of markers to get a more kind of complete and responsible assessment of your iron metabolism. We've got to take into account your copper and your ceruloplasmin, which I'll explain what that is as well. So as part of being a root cause protocol consultant, we're trained to look at these markers and a few more, like magnesium, zinc, sometimes vitamin D and retinol as well. And we read those alongside the hair tissue mineral analysis to give a kind of a better picture metabolically of what's happening around your iron homeostasis. So I won't go through every single kind of marker individually, but I do want to talk about a couple of the iron markers and the copper markers, because they're really important to see alongside for the iron markers for the best kind of picture. So, and I'm sure a lot of us have heard of copper, but probably not many of us have heard of ceruloplasmin, which I will talk about. So another pretty well-known marker that we often get taken at the doctors is hemoglobin, and 80% of the our body's iron is used to carry oxygen around. About 70% of that is in hemoglobin. And once upon a time, hemoglobin was actually the measurement that they took for iron status. And then at some point that kind of morphed into being all about ferritin. But like ferritin, it's still a bit of a dipstick measurement, like measuring the oil in your car, the level of oil in your car. And that's useful, but it doesn't tell us much about the kind of movement of iron as a marker like serum iron. So serum iron measures the efficiency of our iron recycling system. And if we keep going with that car analogy, which is not my analogy, by the way, that's Morley's analogy, but it just, I can't think of a better one. It just makes so much sense and it makes it easier to understand. So measuring serum iron is probably similar to measuring how many kilometres per litre you're getting from your car, so the efficiency. So it's not just this dipstick measurement of how much, how much oil, like ferritin and hemoglobin, but it's how efficiently your car is using that oil. So in the body, that would translate to how efficiently is your body recycling iron. So you can start to see that unlike ferritin and hemoglobin, serum iron is a much more effective measurement because it measures that functionality and that recycling of iron around the body, because iron is supposed to be in motion all of the time. So that recycling system that I'm talking about, it's called the reticuloendothelial system. I can't believe I said that right. Such a mouthful. So we just call it the iron recycling system, or the RES for short. But so, it provides, our recycling system, as I said, provides like 95% of our daily iron needs, as I mentioned, to make new red blood cells and other iron-based proteins as well, like heme. So the serum iron is a good measure of how the recycling system is working, and transferrin would be another good marker for that as well. So transferrin is like the key transport protein that moves iron from the tissue, like back into the bloodstream and then back to the bone marrow, where it gets made into the new red blood cells for the next day. So it's that's the recycling. So transferrin is also really dependent on optimal retinol, optimal vitamin A in your body as well. But I guess the real kicker is that whole recycling system of iron requires copper to work. So copper lets the iron, it's like the dormant on the cell, it lets the iron out of the cell. Copper is then what takes the iron and loads it onto the transport proteins. So, if the recycling system doesn't have copper, that iron that should be in motion all of the time and being recycled is then getting stored. So it's wreaking havoc in our cells, and it's stuck in our tissue, and it's stopping that normal cellular process from happening. And it's
so I guess there's like what you're saying. I'm just going to try and dumb it back a bit, because I know that there's so many people going like this is all great, Sheridan, but this is going to go over my head a bit. So basically there's a range of different markers that we're looking for rather than just ferritin and iron. So if we're reporting with low iron, then I guess the question is, are we going back to our GP and asking for, these other markers that you've kind of listed, which I'm going to assume there's a list somewhere that people can get their hands on, and B, also is it at that point that you go, I'm really tired, my iron's really low, I need to go and see a root cause practitioner who can run this testing? Or can you go back to your GP and go, actually, no, my recycling system isn't working, or is working? What do people do from that point?
So with the blood markers, yes, absolutely, you can go back to your GP and request a full iron study. You may not get necessarily all the markers done at your GP that, as a root cause protocol consultant, I like to see. So very rarely will you be able to get your red cell magnesium taken. You might be pushing to get ceruloplasmin measured as well. And I still probably just need to explain quickly what that is. But so yes, is the short answer to that. You can get some of those things done through your GP. You do also have the capacity to order these bloods for yourself. And I'm sure not many people know that you can actually pop online to somewhere like iMedical and order your own bloods and order your own panel. And there's a specific panel that we have called, I think with iMedical, it's called MAG2. You can actually just pop on and order that yourself. And if you go onto the Root Cause Protocol website, there is actually a page there dedicated to explaining what all those blood markers mean and what your optimal levels should be. So, you know, if you want to sit in the driver's seat for your own health, you can absolutely do all this yourself. You don't necessarily need somebody like me. You know, some people are quite capable of just getting their blood markers done and going onto the website and, you know, seeing what all the optimal levels are and figuring out a little bit about where they're at. But I guess that the next step is, well, what to do about it if you figured out that your iron's not very functional in your body.
Yeah, for sure. And then, like you said, running a HTMA, like hair trace mineral analysis, alongside of that is going to give you an even bigger picture. Again, I remember when I did my first HTMA and I was like, okay, this is interesting. But like you said, for those who do want to go do it and do want to sit in that driver's seat, there is that option. But as always, like with anything, like if you're doing gut testing or you're doing hormone testing, whatever it is, you're always going to have better outcomes when you walk through that journey with someone who's obviously qualified in that area. But at least, you know, for some people who may be deep into their health journey already, go, okay, cool, this is something that I feel like I'm struggling with and I want to check in. You know, you can jump ahead and sort of do that side of things.
Yeah, the hair tissue mineral analysis is I would recommend you get a practitioner to look at that. That's not so easy to read.
Confusing.
Yeah, and high doesn't mean high and low doesn't mean low. Ratios are really important, and there is a little bit of, you know, a nuance into reading you know, what that all means. So I would suggest,
is the best test for copper serum copper? Or because, you know, when we're talking about copper being a really important part of this whole picture, how do you go about testing it?
Yeah, so for copper, there's really two markers that we look at, copper and ceruloplasmin. So and ratios are really important there as well. So copper, we are looking at serum and ceruloplasmin in the serum as well. The only problem is ceruloplasmin has an active and an inactive state, and we probably don't need to go into that here too much, but you know, we can't measure the active state of that. So ceruloplasmin, I guess, do you want me to explain a little bit about the copper?
Yeah, for sure. What they are, their role, and then sort of how we test for them, I guess.
Yeah. So, you know, copper's got a pretty profound, a lot of functions in the body, principally around creating energy and clearing exhaust. And the copper, the thing with copper is that it has to be bioavailable, which means it's got to be complexed in a network of proteins and enzymes. So about 95% of our copper in the blood is complex in a protein called ceruloplasmin. So what that basically means is, you know, we want that copper's not really ever free. It's attached to things mostly, but we want it to be in our ceruloplasmin. Okay, so that's where it can be used by the body. So when it's in ceruloplasmin, which then needs to be in the active state, that's what regulates iron and prevents it from causing oxidative stress, all right, and stops that chronic loss of magnesium that we get, you know, from that oxidative stress. So in other words, when we look at a blood test, we're looking at how much ceruloplasmin you have, and there's a bit of nuance to that as well. And we're looking at how high or low your copper is in your serum, and that gives us an indication of how available your copper is to be used by your body and how much of it is in that ceruloplasmin. So they're really, you can't look at iron without looking at copper, because we don't, you know, you can't get that understanding of how well your iron is being used and how available it is until you look at your copper alongside it. And what the other thing that we need to remember is, you know, what your blood tests don't reflect is there can be up to 10 times more iron in your tissue as what there is in your blood. So your blood work doesn't show the iron that's in your tissue. That's why we need to also look at these other markers.
So do you think it's more common then that iron is actually higher in our tissues and, possibly lower in our bloods, because that's what we're all quote unquote presenting with? It's very rare for me to see a client who's, got really high iron, and then we're not getting enough copper in our diets from our foods. That's the generalized picture that you tend to see, or?
Yes, because I mean, a lot of my clientele come with low iron. That's why they're coming to see me in the first place. So I guess the assumption is that, like I said before, that iron is building in our bodies. We don't excrete it. So, it's there. It's just not functional because it's not being recycled properly, which requires us to have enough copper. And yes, most people, I guess, if you were to say in generalizations, come with either really high copper and low ceruloplasmin, so the copper's not where it should be, or really low ceruloplasmin, meaning they just, they don't have the bioavailable copper to be making that iron functional.
Yeah, right. So what are some ways we can start to rebalance this? Because obviously we've got an issue here. And like I said, like a lot of people will now be going, okay, so low iron in my blood test isn't the actual thing. I need to run a full iron panel, and I also need to look at my copper and see what's going on there. And that's kind of, I guess, your basic sort of starting point. And if, this has been an ongoing issue for a long time, then yes, reach out and talk to someone like Amy, or, start to look at some of those deeper root causes of what could be going on, like, nutrient wise and gut wise and hormone wise and all these other things. But how can we increase these nutrients in our diet? How can we improve our copper and improve our iron?
Yeah, so in terms of foods and whole food supplementation, which, I like to recommend as well in certain cases, what we need, if you were to say very generally, for most of us, we need more magnesium, more copper, more retinol, and less dietary sources of iron, just what we get naturally through food sources that contain iron. And those food sources, Mother Nature, she's really, really clever, and she puts together nutrients to balance each other in food sources. So say, for example, retinol, which I touched a bit on, that retinol is the nutrient that puts that copper into the ceruloplasmin so it can be used. Okay, so it's pretty important. That's sort of naturally occurring in animal products. So cod liver oil, beef liver, grass-fed beef liver, grass-fed butter, free-range eggs, and other animal-based products. Magnesium, the foods that are rich in magnesium, I guess, are things like pumpkin and sunflower seeds, fatty fish, seaweed, a whole variety of nuts and legumes and whole grains and leafy greens, and my favourite, dark chocolate.
I was like, I knew that one was going to make an appearance.
It's got to make it on the list. And then, of course, for magnesium, there's a real variety of ways to get that supplementally. So, you can put topical lotions on, you can take baths, you can use liquids and tablets and capsules. And copper, I can't go past beef liver as a source of that has the right balance of copper and iron, that's closest, found closest to the human liver. It's also a really good source of retinol. It's got that ideal ratio of copper to zinc, and it's got, all the B vitamins that we need there as well to help activate those minerals, because, we've got to remember those vitamins are really important part of that picture of helping those minerals to do their job. Other sources of copper are things like shellfish, seeds, nuts, other organ meats as well. And you can actually supplement copper, but I really think that's probably a conversation best had with your practitioner about how to get copper supplementally.
Yeah, wow. So so many different things going there. And for most people, like you said, the basics is approach your diet, address those changes and go, okay, what can we do here? Just right now to start making those changes. But like I said, if you have got, ongoing issues, or that, you've had issues with iron for a long time, then I think it is really important to dig into that whole picture a little bit deeper, because it's usually linked in with hormone stuff and gut stuff, and there's a range of different things going on. So for those listening who go, that sounds like me, I need to learn more about this, how can we find you, how can we reach you, and where can we nerd out on all this sort of amazing content that you have to offer?
Yeah, so I guess probably the last little bit that I want to add is, the take home from all of this, if I have spoken a little bit above some people's heads in terms of the language.
I love it. I'm
not very good at dumbing
it
down. I'm not very good at, anyway, it's a skill that I'm working on. But I guess the message would be is, especially in the face of an iron anemia or a deficiency diagnosis, is just to look a little bit deeper. Don't assume that low ferritin means low iron in your body. And don't assume that if you're suffering from fatigue and other effects of your kind of apparent low iron, that you need more iron to improve your situation. Because there's a really large body of research out there that, that tells us that might be short-term gain for really long-term pain, and that it can really be adding into the picture of chronic disease and metabolic dysfunction. So we really just need to scratch below the surface a little bit more to see what else is going on in our bodies and in our environments. I guess
iron infusions then can be a real damaging thing, because you must be getting I've never had one, but you must be getting such a load of iron in such a short amount of time straight into your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've been there and done that too with my anemia diagnosis a long time ago. I had several infusions, but something just didn't sit right. Even not knowing what I know now, back then, I was starting to think, can this be good for me, putting all of this heavy metal into my body over the long term? So it's just ask more questions is I guess.
I love that. I'm so passionate about them. People ask, look deeper, and start looking around. And also the Cure book by Morley Robbins is an awesome place to start. I love that book. Changed the way I practice and did a lot of things, and I was like, this is really great. So for those who kind of go, I do want to know more, I want to reach out to Amy, I want to hear more, but I also want to read more onto it, I feel like that book's pretty easy to digest as well, in a sense.
Oh, it is. I've encouraged so many people to read it, and it's quite an easy read, and it's Molly's done a really good job, perhaps better than I have done today, of
you've done amazing.
Really understandable for the general public. So that is a fantastic place to start. So as far as contacting me, I am doing a free webinar towards the end of this month. I'm not sure when this podcast is going out, but I haven't got any details for that. But the best way would be if you signed up for my newsletter at amyarmstrong.com.au/newsletter, or followed me on Instagram and Facebook, which I am found at Amy Armstrong Health. Then you will get the details for that via those.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's definitely a super important message to have out, and to jump on and to learn more about it will be great for people. And also your Instagram has a lot of great content as well, and you're reasonably active over there, so do jump over and follow Amy, guys. I have tagged her in our story today, but obviously this podcast I think goes out in a week or two. So make sure you go over, follow Amy, and thank you. That was I loved it, because I'm really in this nerdy health space topic at the moment where I'm like, okay, things need to shift. I want to learn more. I want to know more. But also for a lot of people, this episode will just be the first time they've heard of this and be going, okay, wow, like, can I just baby myself into this? I'll start by following Amy. I'll start by buying the book. I'll start by reading a bit more. And there are a lot of people who speak well on these topics on Instagram. The Real Food Gangsters are really good. There's a few other people who I follow who just have really great information as well. So follow a couple of people and learn a bit more, and go to Amy's free webinar and just start to educate yourself around the whole iron concept, because like we said, it's so much deeper than what our GP is telling us and what we're originally thinking as well.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And I guess the last place that your listeners might be interested in going is to the Root Cause Protocol website. And just even start to delve into some of the iron toxicity posts there that Morley Robbins has written, and just get a feel for it. But yeah, it's complex, but it's really quite simple at the same time if we just start to really nourish our bodies with those nutrients we talked about: more copper, more retinol, more magnesium.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. It was a pleasure having you on here. Thank you for your knowledge and for the hard work and changes you're creating within the health space. We really appreciate it. And appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you.